Yeah, we'll go through.
Well, hello, and welcome to our Ask the Experts live chat, sponsored by McCain Food Service, where today we're going to be talking about sports. Not what's happening on the field, but how restaurants are scoring with fans dining outside the sports arena. We're going to look specifically at takeout, delivery, and catering, and the opportunities posed by tailgating, or the at-home version, couchgating. I'm Peter Romeo, Giants fan and editor-at-large of Restaurant Business Magazine and its website, restaurantbusinessonline.com. I'm going to be guiding our discussion while slipping in some favorable comments about my team. With me is David Henkes, a Packers fan, avid tailgater, and senior principal of Technomic, the research sister of Restaurant Business. David will be sharing some data and insights about the off-premise opportunities presented by the season, and probably putting down the Bears as much as you can. In any case, despite that, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Great to be here, Peter. Thanks very much for having me.
If you'd like to learn more about David or myself, our bios, I believe, are available through the Facebook pages. Before we get started, let's review some housekeeping details. Our presentation is an opportunity for you to ask questions about restaurants' efforts to capture more fall and winter business from sports fans. To ask your questions, please type it into the chat field. They'll be collected and passed along to us by our colleague and confirmed Bears fan, Kaylee Bogdan, off camera. We'll also have instructions at the end of the chat about how to access what was covered here. So let's get started. Sure. David, let's start with the big picture. Give us some context on how big restaurant delivery is. Off-premise in general, delivery, takeout, and catering, and why it's continuing to grow.
Yeah, I think when you look at the off-premise market, we just did a big study on off-premise, and it's about a $236 billion market in consumer spend, growing rapidly. I think when you look at the dynamics within the restaurant business right now, traffic has been challenged in store, and so there's been a lot of focus by restaurants that if the consumers aren't coming to them, they've got to go to the consumer. And so we're seeing a huge explosion in certainly takeout, which has always been there, but really the new thing is delivery. And so delivery has gone way beyond pizza and some of the traditional segments, and is growing over 10% a year. And if you tie in these third-party delivery services, the Grubhubs, the Uber Eats, those types of players, that segment of the business is growing over 40% a year. And so we're seeing some huge movement by restaurants that are really just catering to consumer needs to have food wherever and whenever they want it.
If I recall correctly, you guys recently released a figure for the third-party deliverers, January through June, about $5 billion in sales.
It's about $5 billion in sales, and I think what's really interesting with them, we through our transaction insights also track the retention, and these players are really doing a great job of retaining customers. In other words, once they have them, consumers keep coming back to them over and over again, and so there's a certain amount of loyalty that's driven to these third-party delivery services. And again, a lot of restaurants are really jumping on board and partnering with them, and are finding that those sales are incremental to their business, which is important given some of the fees and costs associated with it. But those are occasions that otherwise the restaurant wouldn't be getting, and so they're seeing incremental growth as a result of that.
What's your sense of how big tailgating or couchgating is in this mix? Do you have any way of gauging that?
Yeah, so I mean it's interesting, and as an avid Packer fan, I've tailgated regularly at Lambeau Field, and there's sort of the difference between the tailgating that gets acquired through supermarket or grocery store sales versus what's acquired at a restaurant, right? And so sort of traditionally it's grilling out in the stadium, but I think increasingly what we're seeing, there's a stat that when you look at sort of social occasions, and we've not researched specifically around tailgating, but I think the opportunity there is certainly in the billions of dollars. And I think when you look at the growth and opportunity, and I've seen stats about tailgaters, they tend to be male, they tend to be between 25 and 44, higher educated, higher income, and so the demographic is really attractive for the tailgating opportunity. And so numbers aside and how big it is, I think there's a huge opportunity to take advantage of sports as a marketing opportunity, and whether it's at the stadium or the arena or whether it's at home, we think it's probably a huge opportunity that bears looking into more by a lot of restaurants.
We tend to forget because of the size and how quickly it's grown, but delivery outside of the pizza segment is still relatively new. And it seems as if tailgating and couchgating is sort of the new facet of that. How do you see restaurants capitalizing on this new opportunity?
Well, I think it's all part of the broader focus on delivery and on away from home, right? And so, part of it is having the right product category. And so pizza, sandwiches, when you look at the products that fit in with sort of that sports mentality, it tends to be shareables, it tends to be, convenience, grab and go driven items. We're seeing a lot of restaurants from, burger joints to, places like Taco Bell really starting to focus on sports marketing, right? So whether it's, just targeting the game occasion and whether it's at home, I think targeting the stadium is a little bit different because you've got to sort of plan ahead and it's a little bit different dynamic and occasion. But we're seeing a lot of restaurants really try and take advantage of that sporting occasion to market themselves and create opportunities.
Mm-hmm. It seems from what we've been covering in the magazine and online that a lot of it is just saying, hey, you are familiar with our delivery, but have you thought about it as a way of feeding your guests when you're having someone over to watch the game? The prime example, Red Robin with its burger bar, now calling it the Big Red Box.
Right.
And suggesting that it's ideal for that. That seems to be half the battle. Or White Castle with their new sliders that they're touting as perfect for the game.
Those are all great examples, and I think, in the research we've done, this would fall under the occasion of, social occasions or social gathering, right? And around 32% of those occasions, and those aren't all just sporting events, right? But about a third of those occasions have a takeout or delivery component to it. So consumers are already in the mindset that takeout or delivery is a viable option for social gatherings. And so I think, it's sort of building on that consumer need state and mindset to create those opportunities around sporting events. And I think those are great examples of restaurants that are really building that that occasion and creating something that isn't there.
Mm-hmm. And we should make note that it's not just for chains. We recently got a press release by an independent in the Washington, D.C. area that offers a fondue for game day catering, despite cheering for the Redskins. Now, I can remember the days when the Giants were in the playoffs and they were playing away. And I remember that one of the more unusual things is that the parking lot was still packed with tailgaters, even though the team wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little about the parameters, because it's not just going to the tailgate party in your nearest NFL team's parking lot.
Right.
What's the extent of this?
Well, and I think that's really how it's really defining it, right? So the tailgating is a very specific component or subset, and again, reaching consumers in the stadium parking lot. Certainly as delivery grows, becomes a lot easier, right? And targeting them ahead of the game to pick up something on the way to the game is easier. But I think restaurants, we're seeing a lot of tailgate parties, right? So if, certainly up in Green Bay, there's a lot of restaurants around the stadium that create tailgate parties. Here in Chicago, when the Bears are playing, or the Cubs, or any team, you tend to see parties that are built around that. And so it could be inside the restaurant, it could be in the parking lot. And again, there's that whole sort of off-premise piece going to the consumer at home. So there's really a lot of ways that restaurants can do this, and it involves bringing consumers to you and creating that atmosphere on game day and creating something unique that consumers can't get anywhere else inside the venue, to offering them convenient options to source food from you as a restaurant when they're watching the game off-premise or at their house or somewhere else.
Absolutely. In that regard, we've seen a lot of activity among the chicken chains, because chicken travels well.
Chicken does travel well.
It's a shareable product, and you can pack it up into big servings way ahead of time. So Bojangles doing some big packs. Interestingly, the packaging seems to be key, because it's a way of signaling your support for the home team with the Panthers and whatnot.
You can certainly build packaging in as a marketing tool for that. I think the smarter restaurant operators certainly look at packaging and the investment they make in packaging as a marketing tool. And so the more you can play that up and have that local angle to it, I think it certainly helps the overall program. Absolutely.
Sure. One of the interesting things is, or one of the possible limitations is, of course, not every town or city has an NFL team to root for. Is this limited just to pros?
Yeah, I think when you talk about tailgating as an option, as a Packer fan, I automatically think to my time at Lambeau, sitting there in 20-degree weather, cooking brats and burgers. But tailgating as an activity can be baseball related, and certainly as a Brewers fan, there's a huge tailgate at Miller Park. But it can also be college sports, right? And so when you think about any Big Ten or SEC town on game day, there's huge amounts of people, and they're all looking for food and drink. And I think even in some markets like Texas, where high school football is Friday Night Lights and the event that high school football is, you can build tailgating opportunities around that. And so a lot of this, and especially for chain restaurants, is very local market driven, right? And so sometimes it's hard to create national programs. You really have to tailor your offer to what that market is. And if it's a big college team, and it could be even college basketball, or if it's high school, or if it's pro football or baseball or even hockey, building those promotions around that specific team and that specific activity is really, it's hard to do from a corporate level, and it really has to be driven, I think, a lot of times by more of a regional or local level marketing activity.
Our sister publication is Food Service Director, a publication for the non-commercial sector, and their college FSDs talk about what a huge business it is just to have the meal kits all set up or the meal packages set up where you just come in, grab it, go to your car.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way that, it's not even just restaurants that can take advantage of this, right? So non-commercial operators, and especially college operators, but, even, if you think about a healthcare operator, or you think about, some of these other non-commercial operators, they too can build promotions around game day, and whether it's for their patients or the guests or the visitors or, the people that live in a nursing home or hospital. I think there's a lot of opportunity to create these occasions, right? And it really becomes an experience and something that is a little bit different than what they would experience Monday through Saturday. And so building that and it becomes an occasion that a lot of people look forward to.
Well, tailgating is synonymous with football, but couchgating is a whole different thing. Do you see, is there an opportunity there for basketball?
I think there's an opportunity there for basketball, and I think when you look at couchgating, right, I mean, this becomes really marketing to whatever occasion. So when you talk about basketball or you talk about a lot of these sporting events, a lot of times they don't happen during traditional meal parts, right? And so I think the way an operator can look at this is this all becomes incremental business, because basketball and certainly a lot of times those are 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, depending on where you're watching the game. Or football games are Sunday afternoon, where you're not necessarily driving a lot of traffic to your restaurant. I think it all becomes very incremental, and it becomes something that operators can use to drive some new growth and create some opportunities.
I believe we have a question.
Yeah, so this is in the context of how best to actually collect orders for game day, takeout, and delivery. Do you guys have an opinion about what might be better to use for online ordering, if the system should be integrated into a point of sale or not?
Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think when you look at, this becomes not just a question about game day, but it becomes a question about how you incorporate takeout and delivery into your overall system. And so I think, sort of the best practice is having that integrated into your point of sale. I think, being able to fulfill those orders quickly. I think the ability to have online ordering, app-driven ordering, Domino's is obviously a great example of a chain restaurant that has built the whole tech infrastructure to drive that, and it's integrated with everything, and they're really a tech company serving pizza at this point. So I think having that all integrated and making it easier for the consumer to order, whether it's online, and really building that into the system is probably the best practice.
My thoughts on it are in terms of the process or how that order is placed. is kind of less important to the operator than when it's placed.
That's true.
One of the advantages of tailgating or couchgating is you know the game's coming up, you know how many people you're going to have, you know how many people you need to feed. So placing that order a day in advance, it takes a lot of operational pressure off the operator, as well as lets the customer know exactly what to expect, when to pick it up, or whatever. And on the flip side, there is that spur of the moment order. You might remember, I guess it was last year or 2 years ago, that Pizza Hut had a promotion where you could use a sneaker to place an order for a pie by just pressing a button on your sneaker. I think there were only 32 pairs of the sneakers made, but and it speaks to the opportunities for basketball. Certainly, the NCAA playoffs, March Madness, has become really a season for the industry, at least for on-premise, and it's logical to think that it'll happen off-premise.
Yeah, I think there's
no
question. March Madness, any type of playoff structure, but March Madness is a unique sporting event, and I think building whole promotions around March Madness and the basketball, and again, you've got 64 college teams, or plus the play-in teams. So what that gives you is nationwide opportunity to create promotions around the games, and you've got multiple games going on per day. And so, really, if an operator isn't marketing or creating some kind of event or targeting March Madness as an opportunity, they're probably missing the boat, because there's tremendous interest. The country essentially shuts down for that first round of of March Madness, and so people are looking to eat, they're looking to drink, and it becomes a big opportunity.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about some specific examples of things we see out there. We mentioned what Red Robin is doing. Another interesting approach, big player in the market, Taco Bell. This year they're doing a 12-pack of tacos. Now they're doing it across the holiday season, but they do point out that football could be football game could be one of the occasions where you'd want this package, which can be delivered. What other examples come to mind for you?
Well, Buffalo Wild Wings, which has always been sports-oriented concept. They've built a value menu around the game day menu, and have really focused on some things, trying not to price things over $5. So you see an opportunity there. Even a player like Yard House, which is a little bit higher end, maybe more of a contemporary casual player, they're focused on sort of building an occasion around Monday Night Football and creating Monday night occasions, right? And so again, that's trying to bring them in. It could also be a takeout or delivery option, but again, building some promotion around a football game. And in this instance, it's a Monday night game. So that's another example of a big chain that, again, can take a nationwide promotion, because Monday Night Football plays everywhere. It's a nationwide game. It's played. Everybody watches it. And so, it creates an opportunity for those yard houses to, again, build a day part or, a meal part where they're, may otherwise be slow on a Monday night.
A very similar approach, though the tactics are different. Applebee's, 500 units of Applebee's are offering a special Monday Night Football promotion where they're delivering, waiving the delivery fee. They offer it specifically for the game and really play up the football aspect, but you could order it anytime during the day, so you can pre-order it, and it's found money.
Yeah, man. I think one other example is McAllister's Deli. They have put a tailgate collection together, which is essentially a package of sandwiches that allows someone to really show up at a tailgate with enough sandwiches to feed the tailgate party. And so that again sort of speaks back to that Taco Bell example that we talked about, of building boxes or packaging that creates a little bit more of a group dynamic that allows you to feed a group. And I think those are some best practices that we've seen from James.
And certainly we do see some commonalities. Shareables, really.
Shareables,
Handheld. Anything else that comes to mind? Hot or cold? Either way?
Yeah, no, well, and one thing we haven't talked about, and certainly it's central to a lot of tailgating occasions, it's the beverage alcohol piece of it, right? And so, when you talk about beverage alcohol delivery, and that's another thing that we've really started researching as part of our adult beverage research, the Drizzlies, the Saucies, the mini bars, these alcohol delivery services are really starting to take off. The research we've done would indicate that consumers, if they can, would like to order from one source, right? So if it's a Grubhub or an Uber Eats, they'd love to be able to get it all at one time. Now, state and local laws don't always allow that to happen, and so it's not something that every restaurant can do, and in fact we see some restaurants trying to build a beverage alcohol delivery business, but it's hard. But I think, when you look at beverage alcohol delivery, it's a huge growth area, and again, as it relates to game day or couch gating or tailgating, it could be a huge opportunity there as well.
Oh, indeed. In anticipation of our talk today, I checked with Pizza Hut yesterday about where they are in beer delivery. And they're up to 100 stores, mostly in California and Arizona, where the laws are a little bit easier. But the whole notion is one-stop shop.
Yeah.
We will bring you your pie and your beer for your football.
And that's exactly what consumers want. And, and unfortunately it doesn't always work out that way. But, we've seen a lot of players that really, because when you think about it from a restaurant's perspective, what's missing a lot of times from these off-premise orders is that either the beverage or a lot of times that high-margin appetizer, but certainly beverage, right? And whether it's non-alcohol or alcohol, being able to somehow include that and incorporate that into the order is hugely critical, and it helps the overall margin and profitability of the restaurant and of the takeout program specifically. And so the more you can figure out how to include a beverage as part of that, and it's easier said than done, right? Because a lot of orders, they've already got a beverage or they're sourcing it from somewhere else. But the more you can do that, again, the higher the margin and profitability will be.
Sure. Well, we've been talking a little about delivery. Do you see a lot of operational differences in takeout versus delivery?
There are certainly a lot of operational differences, I think. I mean, what ends up happening back of house, and we already talked a little bit about ordering, a lot of that goes into it. I think, especially when you start talking about the third-party delivery, the integration of these third-party apps and the technology. I was in a fast food restaurant yesterday, and I saw they had a Grubhub monitor and they had a DoorDash monitor. And so, they had two separate monitors, and they both tied into the point of sale. But, it's just two extra things that you have to do. And so operationally, just to stay on top of it, can be challenging. And so, whereas the takeout is really driven from within the restaurant or people coming in, or, maybe a takeout or a drive-through window, that delivery piece there's an extra couple steps in there that do make it a little bit operationally challenging. The packaging piece certainly. So there's some big differences there.
On the flip side, because you're talking about large orders, in many respects, this whole thing sort of is reminiscent of catering. And one of the benefits of catering is, of course, you can assemble the order in the downtime.
Yeah.
Sunday morning is not usually a packed time for a lot of fast, quick service folks, so it gives them that opportunity for sure. So, now with this business that we're talking about, am I right in assuming that a lot of this is incremental, because you're not going to go sit in the restaurant versus sitting in the parking lot?
I think it is incremental, and I think that's why the opportunities here are so huge, because you are creating new opportunities. And again, it goes back to what I talked about earlier with these day parts that otherwise are probably slow times in a restaurant. Late nights with games, or afternoon games on weekends. So I think the way you look at that is that this has to be incremental, and you build new sales on top of what you're already doing, and that's why it's such an opportunity. And taking whatever number aside it is in terms of what the revenue it represents, it's all newfound money to the restaurateur, to the food service operator, and that's why we're so bullish on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the key question is what happens going forward. Do you see this continuing to grow?
Well, I think it absolutely does. I think sporting events continue to capture the attention and interest of consumers, and certainly as the focus for restaurants continues to be oriented toward providing off-premise solutions, right? So this, again, is not necessarily taken in a vacuum of just sporting events, but what we're seeing is the broader context of this huge explosion in off-premise growth, takeout, delivery, drive-through. The whole thing is growing much faster than the industry as a whole, and I think many restaurants have not yet really taken advantage of sporting activities, couch gating, all of these things that we talked about, have not put a lot of effort against it. And so I think there's a lot of white space, there's a lot of room for growth. And I think it's within the context of this explosion of off-premise business, I think there's still a lot of runway to go for a lot of this.
Should we be so presumptuous as to recommend a plan of action? If you're a restaurant ignoring this market, I would imagine you start first by looking at the opportunity, what sports teams you have.
I think, going back to what I talked about, a lot of this is local driven. And so, while there's some chains that we talked about that do a Monday Night Football promotion or can market to big events like that, certainly the Super Bowl coming up in February is going to be another huge example. But I think more generally, the more successful you are in localizing this and creating, team-oriented or school-oriented promotions and marketing. I think that's where a lot of the success lies, especially for the independent restaurant, but even chains that can localize this and create different opportunities in Green Bay versus Chicago versus Detroit. I think they're going to be better off than others that are just doing a little bit more of a generic program.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for today's installment of Ask the Experts. For more insights and ideas around takeout and delivery and catering, like Restaurant Business and Technomic on Facebook. On behalf of our sponsor, McCain's Food Service, thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you very much.